All right, sorry about that. My camera kind of just flipped out for some reason. Like when I tried to upload the um the original live stream and go live, for some my camera just wouldn't load up the videos. But now I'm here, so we're gonna get started with this live stream. You guys have been on here, know the rules. I pre-read the questions that people submitted to me first, and then I do some updates about developments here on the channel. And then after that, I will read questions in the chat. Um, I do have a hard cutoff this time because I'm going to a friend's birthday dinner tonight. So if you want to ensure that your question gets answered, if you didn't write it in the beginning, please leave a super chat. Otherwise, I may not have time to get to it. But let's first start with the questions that were written to me in advance, like I always do with these. Um, and the first one is, do you think employees deserve compensation for training the LLMs and AI systems they inevitably replace us with? Well, yeah, they do get compensated. Like there are companies who will use the IP um, made by workers and pay them to train the AI. So that's already happening. I mean, my content might even be one day as part of an LLM, for all I know. And for workers who are companies who are going to be built replacing AI, a lot of their job is going to be to train it. So this is part of their normal salary. So it's really as simple as that. Do you think it's possible? The next question is, do you think it's possible to assess insolvency level by using debt to equity, current ratio, interest coverage? Spam call, sorry about that. um, Altman Z score, and cash burn rate. Um, yes, that's the typical way you assess insolvencies, by looking at a company's debt and their future cash flows and whether they have a maturity cliff and they'll be able to pay it. So, yeah, the answer is yes. The other all these switches are pretty simple, so I'm going through them quickly. The third one is, if you were charged and could implement any plan you wanted, how would you make significant progress towards balancing the budget? I am going to be doing a video about that in January. Uh, so I don't want to give away the whole thing, but it's a mix of tax cuts, reforming entitlements, not tax cuts, sorry. Yeah, tax cuts, but reform in the right places, informing, reforming retirement, and most importantly, cutting spending. Like, I think that the problem is that with Reaganomics is that they cut the taxes without the spending. Like, I honestly wouldn't recommend cutting any taxes unless you cut, for every dollar in lost tax revenue, at least $2 to $3 in spending. Uh, the government's problem is a spending problem. I don't know, my most recent videos you've seen about the tax system, about different forms of taxes, and then can you actually tax the rich out of the debt? And I go into more details on this, but the short answer is no, you can't. And it's the government's problem is not a tax problem; it's a spending problem. So yeah, it would be a lot of austerity, is what I would advocate. And there probably are some ways that the government could maybe sell certain unused assets that could help finance some paying back the debt. And if there has to be tax increases, I got to do the math on this to see if it's necessary. They would have to be provisioned to be only used to pay back national debts and not for other kinds of spending. Uh, but I will go more into that in a future video. What are your thoughts on technical options trading? And just, I think he more means like technical analysis, compared to sports betting. Do you think that charting / technical analysis on options or currency pairs is gambling? Uh, I think in the shortest terms, like if you're trading for like less than a week a time frame, it's pretty close. And again, nothing I say on this channel is investment advice. Please do your own research and due diligence. Or if you have any specific questions about your personal finances, contact myself or an advisor that you trust. And you can reach me via email or going on my website, nickpardini.com. I have to do the disclosure before I go into this topic. But when it comes to the idea of technical analysis, I use it historically as a risk management tool. I don't think it's a good idea to select securities based off of just technical chart patterns. However, you can use these charts as a way to manage risk. Like, kind of like if you're wrong, what technical level breaking would prove that you're wrong. Or if you want to like have an exit point, it might help you create an exit point. So yeah, and where I'm reading the questions from, I'm reading them from the comments on the posts I did announcing this live stream. So to answer your question, so that's my answer. I think technical analysis is great for risk management, particularly if you have a holding period longer than say 2 to 3 weeks. I think anything shorter than the daily chart is very speculative. I really only recommend you, if you're going to use technical analysis, using daily and weekly charts, because you have more stronger valid signals. More, the smaller time frame, the more it's really just simply noise. And yeah, when it comes to, so that's that. Now we're gonna. I have 2 posts. I wrote a main post and a reminder post, and now we're doing the questions from the reminder post. And the first one is, I really want you to discuss the transnational capitalist class, their incentives, why they are not loyal to the nation state, and why they are responsible for the decline of the West to create a multipolar world after becoming the dominant class in the era of neoliberal globalization. And no, I'm not referring to Elliott Wave. I'm personally not a fan of Elliott Wave. So yeah, when it comes to the transnational class, what he means really by this is the cosmopolitan class. And the cosmopolitan class are simply people who have spent at least more than, I would say, just to put a rough number, more than 2% of their life overseas, whether that's combined in vacations or experience living abroad. And people who either like had a job abroad or studied abroad or live overseas or have family in other countries. The biggest beneficiaries of the liberal international order, by the way, and often these same cosmopolitan classes are the people who criticize the liberal international order the most, which is kind of funny, and I look at it that way. But when it comes to why they're not loyal to their own countries, I mean, it's not really that. It's just that they feel like they have, since they don't really live in a single place and they have the luxury to be able to move out and about, they tend to have a more citizen of the world view, and idea that like they are superior to the classes of people who can't do what they do, whether that's correct or not. And a lot of them have friends who live overseas that they think should have the opportunity to live and work in the same countries they do, but they can't. And so they're like, oh, I support looser immigration because I want my friend who's in my PhD program in London to be able to live in America too. And they don't really think of the second order effects and the bigger consequences of, yeah, there's a few cosmopolitan class people are expatting in different countries. It doesn't really affect the social structure that much. But if you were having mass migrations of people to move permanently to new countries, it's a very different story. And so I think a lot of it is just them living in their own bubble more than any sort of malice. The next question is, what are top 3 to 5 creators you should check out? Maybe there are smaller creators who could use a boost. I was going to do look at some of my subscription list and talk about the top content that I'm subscribed to that has less than 10,000 subscribers, but I didn't really have time to do that. But like, I would say that in terms of other finance YouTubers, the best one out there is Patrick Boyle. He's pretty big already. He has a better sense of humor than me when it comes to a lot of these things. He does a good job breaking down a lot of specific topics. So I would say that's a good YouTuber to check out. For all the old money people who want more details on the old money families, Old Money Luxury does a good job of breaking things down. I like Peter Zahan's YouTube channel, even though I don't entirely agree with a lot of what he says. I would say I don't really watch a lot of other finance related YouTube channels to be quite honest, because I've kind of just researched this stuff on my own. And Company Man is another good one. He does like the history of like the rise and fall of like specific companies. And Forgotten Places is a good one if you want to know about like abandoned places in the Midwest and other parts of the country and what happened to them. Geography Now, I like when it comes to geography. I think he does a really good job with breaking that down. I like Money and Macro as well. Is a good YouTube channel. Yeah, and there's probably a bunch of other ones I can do. And then the Macro Dirt podcast is just done by my friends Jared Dillian and Tony Greer. Is I think pretty good too. But it's more lighthearted, just kind of breakdown of the markets. Yeah, that kind of answers that question. And then the next question that I have, so let me get back to see if I have any more old ones. Oh, I have one more. How does Elon Musk's Doge program fare to other similar projects implemented in the past? Do we have anything to compare it to? So, yeah, when it comes to what's it called? The Doge, some comparisons I would say is that there was something called the U.S. Bureau of Efficiency from 1916 to 1933 to help keep the government efficient. It was gotten rid of during the Great Depression because FDR and his voters wanted a bigger, more generous government to be less efficient on purpose so it can employ more people. So, yeah, that's the first one. The second one was the Grace Commission in the 80s, where Ronald Reagan had a investigative committee to look over government efficiency and waste. They found over 400 billion in potential savings, but a lot of the recommendations were not fully implemented, and that was kind of the big flaw of Reagan, was that he was able to cut taxes, but he was not able to cut spending really at the same pace. And then there's also the Office of Management and Budget now, which discloses a lot of the budgetary issues in Congress, but it's generally not listened to by politicians today. And then the difference of the Doge today is it's not really a part of the actual government. It's going to be a private organization that just makes recommendations to the administration, whose job will be to implement it. I hope they succeed. I hope they even get maybe 20 to 30% of what they expect, because that would still be meaningful progress in the problem of government spending. So that is my view on the Doge, is that I hope it works out. The historical precedents are there, but they didn't really succeed that well. And yeah, that is now all the pre-questions. And so with all the pre-questions out of the way, I'll just have a few updates about the channel before I get to your guys' questions. Yeah, so first of all, we had our first meetup last weekend in Las Vegas, Nevada, which I saw a bunch of you there, and it went very well. We're going to have more of them as part of the Analyzing Finance with Nick tour. Next one is going to be in San Francisco on January 2nd. There is a link to it in some earlier posts, and after this live stream ends, I will put a link to the Eventbrite page in the description and in a pinned comment. But it's going to be on January 2nd. So my Bay Area fans, come up there. I'm going to have an evening to hang out with all you guys. And then January 11th, we'll have one in San Diego, California. So all the San Diego people, we're going to have a meetup then. And then I haven't planned a date for it yet, but there will also be one in Orange County, California, closer to the end of January. So that is the big three next ones. And depending on how well those go, we're going to expand it to other parts of the country. We have a lot of votes, actually, for cities that have hit the quota. They include, but I haven't set any dates for them because I want to see versus how many people actually show up versus how many people vote in these polls that we've done, but we have people who want. We have enough people to hit the quota in New York City, of course, Washington D.C., Boston, Philadelphia, Dallas, Texas, Austin, Seattle, and Zurich in Switzerland, and Chicago. Those are the ones that we have, and then there's a few cities that are close, like a few places in Florida and in other parts of Europe and Canada. But yeah, if you want me to come to your city, vote on our poll that we have that I've posted in most of the pinned descriptions of my recent videos and pinned comments. And I would like to see you guys all there at this. I'm excited really about the Analyzing Finance with Nick tour. And then we've also have some updates with the videos. Like I'm going to try to record some more of these videos out of like a more formal studio versus where I do it in my home office now, to try to improve the quality of this channel. And I'm going to be making some other upgrades. That's why I'm releasing a lot more videos in December, so I can push out the archive and kind of start the new year with a new level of production for the channel. Thanks for bearing with me with the sound quality. I know my last video where I presented to the Chamber of Commerce talking about the Trump administration's effect on the market was a little bit bad on the sound, because my microphone, which I bought, one of these DJI clip things, just didn't connect to my camera like it was supposed to, and so I had to use a backup. So I apologize for that, but I'm going to work on ironing that out between now and the end of the new year. And that's really when it comes to channel updates. I do have some good interviews coming up too, and you guys could comment whether you want to see me bring on first my expert interview with the expert I brought on about the economics of longevity and why upper class people tend to live longer, or my expert interview with one of my former colleagues at the options hedge fund I worked at, talking about volatility trading and how volatility influences decision making. So if you like one or the other better, feel free to leave it in the comments on this stream. But both of them will be coming before the new year ends. So this year ends. Sorry. So now with news, let's go back to questions, really. So first one is, hey, Nick, love your videos. Are you Christian? Are you Republican? Let's see. Well, I am a practicing Catholic, so that answers the first question. So yes. The second one is, I'd like to have you guys take a guess, honestly. What do you think my political ideology is? Do you think I'm a center-left person? Do you think I am a moderate? Do you think I'm a far-right or libertarian or some other political ideology? I'll leave that up to you guys to take a guess. I'm not really I am not going to hide my views on specific issues on this channel, but I'm not going to really be an outright partisan YouTube channel. I'm not trying to be Ben Shapiro here. This is Analyzing Finance with Nick, not Analyzing Politics with Nick. The next question, what's it called? Have you heard of fart coin? Is that a joke? I've never really, it's just, there probably is a meme coin with that name, but I don't really follow meme coins. Next question is, hi, Nick, what does my economist friend mean when he says trickle down economics doesn't work? Well, most likely what it means is that it didn't succeed in actually trickling down. That the rich had greater gains than the poor did, and during economic good times. And that's generally the case. If you have more capital to invest, you're going to get more return on that capital in absolute numbers. Maybe you might get lower percentage return than maybe somebody with a smaller amount of capital, but in terms of raw dollars returned, you're probably going to have more since you have more to start with. And that's why a lot of it doesn't work. And yeah, when the thing of trickle down economics, when they did cut taxes, of course the wealthy got more taxes cut because they pay more taxes. America may not have the highest tax rates, but definitely is the steepest in terms of progressivity of tax rates of any major country in the world. Like a large minority of Americans don't pay any federal income tax. And so by that default, and most Americans don't pay more than 17 to 20% on taxes outside of the more blue states in this country in terms of like middle class families, particularly married couples. So as a result, yeah, it's hard to cut taxes disproportionately from the middle class when they already have a lot relatively low taxes compared to the higher income people. But yeah, I think trickle down economics failed not because of that. I think he's if that's the reason why he says it's failed, he's wrong on that. I think the reason why trickle down economics didn't work was because it created the unsustainable deficit economy that we have now, and the Reagan administration did not do enough to cut spending. Let's see. Next question. Is you think a PhD in finance is worth it? Do you want to be an academic for a career? If you do, you probably need a PhD to do that. If you don't want to be an academic, no, you probably don't. You don't need a PhD to work on Wall Street. I mean, maybe a PhD in mathematics if you want to be a quant, but if that's your goal, no, you don't need a PhD in finance. My view on PhDs is that, like, since I do not want to be a college professor for my primary career, I think I would do one for fun. It's my form of my retirement at a local university near where I live, and I'd probably do it in some sort of history field, whether it's economic history or some other form of history, because I think that'd be a fun topic to study for a PhD on the PhD level. Let's see. Next question do I have here is with Ontario, Canada threatening to cut power off to the states. What's your take on that? I think it's an empty bluff. Like, the U.S. is the biggest buyer of all Canadian goods. They're the dominant trade partner. Canada sells the raw materials that the U.S. makes into more finished products for the most part. And Canada doesn't really have the best relationship with China. So who are they going to sell it to otherwise? And the EU's economy is shrinking. So, well, it's not shrinking, but it's not growing fast enough. And its demographic curve makes it they're not buying many new products. So, yeah. And given how Trudeau is in the hot seat in Canada, he needs to talk tough, because if he caves to Trump, the Liberal Party is going to lose even more seats than they likely are going to lose in their next election. Yeah, and this comment of Patrick not being a good YouTuber if you're Christian, I've seen enough of his videos. I don't think he's ever said anything that is anti-Christian. Well, if I'm wrong about that, I'd like to be corrected, but it's a weird comment. Will Canada make a comeback? Everyone in the world has a high school diploma and speaks English nowadays. Canada can make a comeback if they change their governance and they stop doing the things that are causing them to sink right now, which is a combination of a overly tight housing supply, excess immigration, and building a rentier economy that doesn't actually produce anything. They need to adjust their economic and regulatory environment to be more globally competitive and to incentivize actually making end-use goods and services that other countries want to buy. Canada had a similar fiscal issue. It's a little different, but they were in the dumps really in terms of their economy and sentiment in the early to mid 1990s, and they had some reforms that kind of got them back on track. So it can happen again. Do I think that Canada's going to outperform the US anytime soon? Probably not, unless if the Canadian dollar rallies a lot due to a surge in commodity prices. If oil goes to $200 a barrel and all the minerals like gold and silver and all the other stuff, mining exports that Canada exports, go way up in price, it could cover up a lot of their problems. That's like what happened with Brazil and South Africa from 2000 to 2007. They were still the inefficient economies they always were, but it was disguised by high commodity prices, improving their trade balance and bringing wealth into the country that was not really sustainable ultimately. Next question is, You mentioned in your roots go back to Switzerland. I want to ask what your opinion of Switzerland in its current state. I mean, Switzerland, I think, and again, I say this from an outside point of view. I do have some family members who live there, but I'm not following Swiss politics on a day-to-day basis. I, I think it's probably the best run country of any developed economy. Like, I'd copy most of Switzerland's economic policies in America if I had the chance to do it. Uh, they they seem to balance a lot of things. The only issue they have is their niche as Swiss banking, due to FATCA and other anti-bank secrecy laws, has lost a little bit of its luster. But the fact that the franc keeps going up no matter what compared to the rest of the currencies in the world, despite the S&B doing its best not to allow that to happen, is kind of a sign of how well trusted and how well regarded Swiss institutions are. And based on what I know about Swiss culture and how they have like the most pro-business small government really of any country of its size or bigger in the developed world, I remain bullish on Switzerland. But I'll do more next year when I do a economic future of Switzerland video, and I'll dive more deep into that on the research side. What effect do you think Trump will have on the stock market? I just did the video that came out on Wednesday about that, so watch it. Did you watch the OpenAI 12 Days of Christmas videos, including their new editor and iPhone release? I was very impressed. I have not seen it yet. I've had some friends send me the Sora clips, which looked pretty impressive. And I've seen the updates gradually added on as I use a lot of AI to help with my main business and also help production on this channel. So yeah, I'm pretty bullish on AI in terms of the technology. If you want to know more about like a deeper dive into like AI, I did a video with my colleague Murphy McCann a couple weeks ago, right before Thanksgiving, where we kind of break down the AI sector and what it kind of means for the markets and the economy. Yeah, should the healthcare industry be nationalized? No. I mean, this is the thing. I'm going to go on a little rant here because this whole news of the United Healthcare CEO is kind of bringing out some of the worst elements of certain corners of society, particularly a lot of internet communities. And there's a misunderstanding that like health insurers are the ones that are responsible alone for healthcare prices. Are health insurers incentivized to have higher prices for stuff? Yes, because they have fixed gross margins. And I did videos about that. I did an interview with about last summer with a healthcare venture capitalist, where I go into the flaws of the healthcare system and why there's a lot of negative incentives for insurance companies. But I think the other main problem, and I do also talk about this in this series, is that the American healthcare system spends twice as much of GDP than any other country. And a lot of that is driven really by the fact that our society has decided that the healthcare industry, kind of like education history, is a jobs program for middle and upper class college educated professionals. And for every doctor or nurse, there are several administrators who are paid high salaries and with uncertain actual value. And it's the same with universities. Like, there's really been very minimal growth above the rate of population growth for college professors, but the number of admins at university has gone through the roof, and these admins are average earn six-figure salaries. And I feel like a lot of these technically non-for-profit, like hospitals and universities and the medical industry, but a lot of cash running through them, basically in many places, particularly the Rust Belt, replaced the manufacturing jobs, and we're kind of become like a source of middle class employment for parts of the country that otherwise wouldn't have any middle class employment, or provide extra middle class employment in places where there's not enough jobs in the core industries, such as maybe tech in the Bay Area or finance in New York. And as a result, yeah, if you let's say we cut healthcare, make it completely efficient, and just get rid of all the fat in terms of the admin staff, in terms of the health insurers price gouging, in terms of the overpriced medical treatments and prescriptions and all that stuff. you'll have mass layoffs across the country, and you'll have a bunch of overeducated and underemployed people who have nothing to do. And it just makes me. I talked about this in a video about the middle class back in January or February. I forgot the title of it. Like, "Are middle class jobs useless?" That's the title of it. And it goes into it. And I use healthcare systems as an example. And that's why we have to pay these. You have to pay for all these middle class salaries somehow. Like, if and that's how we're paying for it, through higher tuition and higher healthcare costs. So yeah, that's your question. Do you want to have lower healthcare costs, or do you want these people to have higher paid enough jobs to live middle class lifestyles that our society believes that they are entitled to? Uh, that's a real question, but nobody really wants to talk about that because it's very third rail and controversial, really, on both sides of the aisle. Um, and then RJ, I like that your comment here. I'm actually one of the unproductive people, nice paying government jobs. At least I appreciate the honesty. Um, does America need a sovereign wealth fund? No, America does not need a sovereign wealth fund. A sovereign wealth fund is created when your government generates excess revenue relative to expenditures due to usually a natural resource. Like, for example, Norway and Alaska have sovereign wealth funds because they have so much proceeds for oil that they take in exceeds what they expend. I mean, maybe Norway, their public finances have moderated in recent years, but for Alaska, they don't charge any state income tax. They have the lowest, in terms of, you combined all the forms of taxation, they have the lowest tax burden of any state in the US. And the reason they do is because they have all these royalties from oil that they reinvest in a sovereign wealth fund. And the dividends from the sovereign wealth fund they pay as kind of like a UBI check to all the residents of Alaska. If you're not a country with that kind of privilege, that you just, without overburdening taxes, you're able to generate that much revenue, then you have a sovereign wealth fund. Like, if America had a sovereign wealth fund and finance it finally through traditional means of taxes, it means Americans are overtaxed. So I would rather have lower taxes and that money be allocated to people to make their own investment decisions than some sovereign wealth fund to make investment decisions. It's like, basically, if you want a sovereign wealth fund, you're saying that the government is better at investing money than the private sector, which, as somebody who works in the investment industry, I find that to be laughable. The next question is, what's your take on Gen Z? Do you think they will create a major impact in society, or are they screwed? Will Gen Z bring a new age in investing? Well, this is another kind of mini rant that is not really worth a whole video, but I would like to chat about. And that is, I think that America is just coming out of a 20-year dark age right now. Like, the combination of, like, the hangover from the tech bust in 2000, the GFC, the bad governance we had for most of the last 16 years, basically since 2008, and a lot of the cultural degradation are all really kind of, and then the pandemic, they're all kind of combined, like, symptoms of, like, just a broader, like, dark age for society. Like, I'm aging myself a little bit, but I remember the 1990s. Like, it was my childhood, and it was legitimately a more optimistic and a better time where people had more hope, and you were able to do things a lot more in terms of economic opportunity on the individual level than you had been. And not even just because of, like, policy and regulation type of stuff. It was just the economy had a much healthier foundation back then. And I think, after, again, going through just several bad presidents and bad political culture, bad economic culture, TARP and the bailout, and the result of that creating the second order effect of everybody feeling like they were entitled to a bailout because the big banks got it. it just resulted in a series of like bubble blowing, inefficient economy, and just a general dark age for young people. And I think that's going to change. It's like I think starting next year, and we won't see it early because in 2001 and 2002, nobody really, or even up to 2007, nobody thought we were living in a dark age, even though it was the beginning of it. And it's the same thing now. Nobody's going to think that nobody in 1989 or 1990 thought it was the beginning of a golden age back then. There was a garden variety recession and a savings loan crisis. But I think that you're Gen Z, you're going to get your opportunity now. Like now is your guys' opportunity to make things happen. And my general view with Gen Z is that um, it's like any other generation. There are the half of them who are productive and ambitious that are going to do things, and the half who are just going to sit and be lazy and not do anything. And the bottom half always has a different form. The bottom half of the boomers were nicknamed hippies. The bottom half of Gen X were the slacker generation. The bottom half of millennials were basically I can't really, I think it's probably one of those words I can't say on YouTube, but they were probably spending too much time with certain recreational substances. And then Gen Z, the bottom half has fried mental health. So it comes out in different ways in each generation, but there's always a bifurcation. And I think that the Gen Zs in general are a lot more fiscally practical than their older brothers and sisters in my generation, the millennials. And they have less competition for jobs because of the boomers phasing out. And there's just a smaller cohort size overall. So they're going to have more opportunities. I think the next generation, like whenever I have future children, their generation is probably going to be even more prosperous than Gen Z because smaller birth rate means lower population for competitors, but the same supply of goods and services. And so there's going to be more prosperity. So it's actually the most prosperous generation in American history wasn't the boomers. It was the people born during the Great Depression, because that's the last time we had a giant birth rate slump. These birth rate slumps that we're having right now, again, are the product of a social dark and economic dark ages. We had one during the 20s and the late 20s and the 30s and the early 40s during the Great Depression and World War II. We had them during the area around the Civil War in the US. And whenever you have these like bad cycles in history, low birth rates are a byproduct of it. So the people who happen to be born during those times, they tend to be the winners because the economy starts to recover. The generation under them is bigger, and they can ride the coattails of that by selling products and services to them. I know that's a very big rant, but that's kind of my thoughts on Gen Z. I'm optimistic about you guys. You'll make it. And unlike doomer YouTubers, I actually want you guys all to succeed, because if you do, you're more likely to become clients of my wealth management firm. So I'm rooting for all of you. Next thing, I gotta scroll up and come back to some of these questions. What are your tips for a 17-year-old thinking about going into finance as a career? Well, first of all, you should think about if it's what you actually want to do. Just do research about it. Like, what's it like working in the industry? Do you actually, what niche it is? Finance is 17, just like healthcare. It's like about 1/6 of the economy. There's so many different things in finance. You could be a real estate person. You could be a stock investor. You could be a bond investor. You can be an investment banker. You can be in lending. So you got to figure out what you actually want to do in the world of finance. And then once you do that, you should study something that will help you develop some useful skills towards that in college, either finance itself, accounting, or some sort of economics or some sort of mathematical major. And then you can do internships and then eventually get the job in the path that you want to do. But you're 17, enjoy your life, just get good grades in high school, and don't make any bad mistakes that you can't take back. Let's see. I would say, is deindustrialization real? Yes and no. I mean, in terms of raw industrial output, the U.S. manufactures more stuff now than it ever has in its history in terms of actual volume. In terms of employment, it's gone down a lot. Like the idea of the people's employment being tied to a single factory has been dead for over a generation. So no, I think a lot of the West is actually reindustrializing because of the geopolitical tensions out there and the pandemic exposing how vulnerable supply chains were in the 2010s. And so it's actually shifting the other way. America and the Western world is rapidly reindustrializing. Do you think that Nietzsche's idea of resentment and master-slave morality can tell us a lot about finance? I have to really think about that one. I don't, off the top of my head, the answer would be no. Why do you think that's the case? Because again, I've read about this. Oh, that's another podcast. You want recommendations? I spent all the last winter when I was on my end of the year break listening to all the episodes of Philosophize This. It's by Stephen West. He does a really good job of breaking down like basic concepts of philosophies, and he did talk about this thing with Nietzsche, and to understand like who all these philosophers are, what their ideas are, and what the logical conclusion is for that kind of thinking from an unbiased perspective. So if you want to learn more about philosophy, I highly recommend Philosophize This. Do you think you could do an iceberg of finance economics books? I did a video called Books of the Iceberg of Finance several years ago. And I'm going to be releasing as a Christmas present to all you guys I know I did the complete iceberg of finance for Thanksgiving. I'm doing the complete iceberg of economics where I clean it up, merge all the videos into one, fix some of the sound stuff, and cut out some of the dead space to give you guys the complete iceberg of economics. So I guess you'll be able to rewatch it then. But yeah, and I published the book list for everybody who joined my Substack. It's easier for me, like a book list, I think would be make a boring video. I did like a short one for the old money book list, but it's just not really good content. The same thing I've been struggling with is tier lists. I've tried to make several tier lists on this channel. One about like the countries I've covered on economic futures, another one about Doomer. And every time I've recorded them, they just don't turn out very well. Like I rewatch them and I'm like, I don't find them that interesting. And it's like, if I go too surface level, I'm not saying adding any insight, but if I go way too in depth, the tier list video will be like 6 hours. So I'm having a hard time making I think tier list might be suited more for like pop culture and sports and other topics where you can have really quick takes and people will get it. Whereas for my topics, I think it's a rather hard format to make. Do you think philosophy plays a big role in finance? Yes, it does. Because philosophy impacts how people spend money. And a lot of philosophy, it's more economics than finance itself, though. Finance is pretty hard with numbers and trying to find the most optimal thing to do. But economics, yeah, because economic policy and what people think is the optimal form of an economy is totally dependent on their philosophy, whether on what is fair, what is morally right, what is justified, what is a good distribution of wealth, what is truly prosperity. Like, I mean, I've gotten comments on here saying that the West is the poorest part of the world because it has low birth rates. And they measure birth rates as the sign of prosperity. But if you look at all the countries with the highest birth rates in the world, they are the least prosperous in terms of economic growth and standard of living. So, and GDP per capita. So I think that the point I'm making is that everybody has different meaning of what economic philosophy really is. Yeah, that's one thing you don't realize is that Gen Z is the first to be recorded and publicized. No, I think millennials are the first generation to be constantly recorded and publicized. And I know myself and a lot of my peers are very careful with what they put in text messages or in emails because of that very thing. I mean, now I'm kind of jumped the shark because I'm a semi-public figure on YouTube. But before that, yeah, there's plenty of people in my generation who are pretty paranoid about that kind of thing. Do you think that Mastercraft is going to be added to the NASDAQ? They're going to announce their choice in 15 minutes or so. I have no idea. I haven't really been following the situation close enough. And if I get into my specific opinion on MSTR, it kind of will violate my rule of not talking about single stocks on these live streams. Let's see. Top 5 finance Wall Street movies. Do you want documentaries or just fiction movies? Because they're very different. I think the best in terms of fiction movies for a finance-related Wall Street movie is still Trading Places. Yeah. In terms of documentaries, I really liked one called Floored. It was about the rise and fall of the commodity futures trading pits in Chicago. And it has some of the funniest clips I've ever seen in a documentary. How people, and I think it's on for free on YouTube. Floored is how some of these old timey floor traders react to digitalization and the internet disrupting them. I got a real kick out of that one. Those are probably the two that stand out the most to me. Yeah, Big Short was decent, but I mean, I don't know. I feel like maybe because I already kind of knew a lot of the concepts in that movie, it just didn't excite me as much. Same with like Billions. Like I know the plot of Billions because it's based off of like at least not entirely off verbatim, but it's mostly based off of a true story. So I don't really need. I already know what's going to happen in a way at the end, at least. So I don't really watch it. Do you think our tax system can be improved? How can it be improved? Oh, it can be improved a lot. I mean, I think the income tax should be phased out and replaced with other forms of taxation, such as higher property taxes. That would be a more equitable system. It would probably reduce the amount of revenue that can be raised, but you also would have a smaller government then. But there, I think, and then the VAT / national sales tax in theory would be good, but I don't like putting the camel under the nose under the tent for a new form of tax without completely constitutionally abolishing the previous one, because otherwise you get stuck with both. Like look at Europe. Let's see. What was I gonna say? I'm scrolling up here to see if I've missed anything. That's kind of crazy that people born in 2017 are turning 18. I was in high school in 2007 by comparison. So yeah, that's let's see. Let's next question really there's a lot more common. Are corporations people? I mean, legally, they are persons for things such as like lawsuits and taxes. And I think limited liability is a very important concept. Like, why would you, if you could lose more than you put into a company, why would anybody start a company? You have countries where that culture is like if you borrow against a business, it's your personal assets. And that just discourages entrepreneurship. Like, if you want creative destruction and if you want the startup culture, you're going to have a legal separation between businesses and people. And a lot of the controversy on that is because of Citizens United. But if you really look at it, like, watch my video about the gaps in funding between the right and the left if you want to learn more about campaign finance. Corporations are not the ones who are driving the big spread between the partisan bias in campaign donations. It's a different group of people. So check that out. What do you think the whole C-suite is planning due to the whole United Healthcare situation? Well, they're probably going to hire more security. That's the main implication of that. Like, yeah, it's kind of spooky now. If you're somebody who's involved in a business or does something or says something that a large chunk of the population doesn't like, that you're at risk of being attacked by a crazy person. That's not really a good precedent to set. We don't really want that in this country. And so I think that might be the thing, is that you're just going to have, or you might just not publish photographs of management on company websites so that people don't recognize them. Uh, I haven't really thought more through it than that, though, to be honest. Um, yeah, and the do you have an interest in literature in general? What is your favorite book? You mean like fiction book, Joe? Um, I used to read a lot more literature when I was younger, primarily in my, I don't know, from the ages of like 6 to 20. Really, kind of since then, I read a lot more like nonfiction. Like 95% of the reading I do today is nonfiction because I read to learn. I enjoy reading, but I enjoy reading because I enjoy learning new things that I can get from reading. Um, Fiction, I think, is a better mediums for fiction is are movies and video games. Um, but in terms of my favorite fiction books, um, there's a few of them. Like my favorite books, really generally, are nonfiction narratives, which are nonfiction stories that read like fiction. Like example would be like Ben Mesrick's books, like Ugly Americans, or Michael Lewis's Liar's Poker are up there. In terms of pure fiction, um, I liked Catcher of the Rye a lot, actually. And what's it called? And then I liked the surprising also The Old Man and the Sea. Not necessarily as it was a great story, but like Hemingway was really good at just painting the super relaxing vibe. Like when I read that book, I just imagined myself just fishing off the coast in Florida and just like in a chill state of mind. It painted a good ambiance. Um, Yeah, there's probably other fiction books. Like if I went through my whole reading history, I can give you a better answer. It's just they just don't come to the top of my head because it's like movies. Like there hasn't really been a good movie that's come out in 10 years. And there really hasn't been any great fiction that has come out in the last 10 or 20 years. Oh yeah, I forgot. My real favorite fiction book is actually Life of Pi. That's number one. That I like that. That was the last one I would say I really enjoyed both the story and the ambiance. So I'd put Life of Pi as number one for my fiction by Jan Martel. Uh, let's see. Can you consider a long episode about the COVID era behavior and changes we see today? Yeah, that's actually not a bad idea. Um, I will put that under consideration. But I have such a long queue right now. So if I don't get to your topic, don't take it personally. I have over 50 videos to make, not counting all the stuff that's already scheduled to release. Like I'm going to be taking a break from production for the next 2 to 4 weeks. But you won't miss a beat because I've already pre-scheduled all the videos. So you guys will all be good. But yeah, there's a lot. And there's always new ideas that are coming. Like I tend to be, which is rare for a finance person, I tend to be more on the creative side. And so that is and so I get floods of ideas and you guys help me generate more ideas. So I always appreciate the suggestion. Um let's see. Or Reminiscence of Stock Operator. That's a great one too. I read that in college. Oh, Pokemon cards. Yeah, I had my first experience with trading was Pokemon cards when I was in fourth and fifth grade. Like my Pokemon card collection went up from a very small amount of money to a very large amount of money for an 11-year-old back down to zero. And I learned about asset bubbles the hard way through my experience with buying and hoarding holographic Pokemon cards. Like that was the summer of 1998, 99, or maybe like for Pokemon card for people who are involved, the kids with Pokemon cards. It was like it was an experience really that was very unique that I don't think will be replicated for this generation. Uh, Bringing back good memories. Do you have any knowledge of modern monetary theory? Yeah, I've talked about it on both the iceberg of finance and economics. So watch my take there. Um, let's see. Next question I've got here. What are your thoughts on the whole Assad-Syria situation? Well, the question is, it's unclear on the ideology of the successor state. I mean, I've heard some rumors that they're going to try to liberalize their economy and they might end up being part of the LIO in the future, but nobody really knows because the supposed leadership of the rebellion has had a mixed history in terms of our ideological ideas and background and alignments. So the question, honestly, is who knows? I'm sorry if I'm answering too many I don't knows, but it'd be intellectually irresponsible for me to make some bold opinion about this kind of stuff. Nick, I think it's time to update Economic Future America. Yeah, I'm going to be bringing Chris Street back on to talk about that. That video will come out in January. What do you guys think of some of the expert guests that I have on here? Like, who is your favorite? Which ones you don't like? I'm kind of curious because I'm going to bring on more guests, but they're not necessarily be big names necessarily, but they're smart people I know, whether in this industry or out of it, that have their own expertise that I think really add to the conversation. At what level income does it make sense to financial advisor be worth, assuming one is financially savvy? It's a net worth level and a net savings level. Like, I would say, and it depends on your age too. So I would say, like, if you have, say, if you're under 40 and you have more than a couple $100,000 in liquid assets and you're saving at least $5,000 a month, then it's probably time to definitely have an advisor. And if you're at lower levels, let's say you're saving $2 to $3 grand a month and you're at maybe a little over six figures in liquid assets, you could even consider it then. And then if you're an older person, it's probably 500,000 or more in liquid assets. At smaller levels, you're probably fine just investing in diversified indexes. But when you get bigger and you have to worry more about drawdowns and your contributions are not drowning out your portfolio drawdowns, or your returns are actually making you just as much, if not more money than your savings, that's the time you need an advisor. Yeah. And then what's it called? Cats or dogs? Oh, I'm definitely in the dogs category. I mean, I know people who have cats, they're just not my cup of tea. Like, I like dogs because they're always super happy to see you, and I just have a personal preference. However, I don't really believe in having dogs if you live in an apartment. Dogs need a backyard. They need a place to roam around when you don't have time to devote attention to them. Let's see. Would you consider a wealth advisor in small business? What do you mean by that? Do you consider a wealth advisor practice to be a small business, or would you recommend a small business to use a wealth advisor? Because those are very different questions. Like, yeah, I mean, so yeah, I mean, I think a wealth advisory practice is a small business. I believe I'm a small business owner by having my own. When it comes to a small business wealth advisor, it depends. If you have cash, like a large amount of corporate cash that you want to be managed, instead of hiring a treasury team to handle that, you can have a wealth advisor do it for you for a pretty low fee. So if you have a 401k or a retirement plan for your employees to manage, a wealth advisor can help you do that as well. And if you're planning on either IPOing or have concentrate or having or going to be acquired, and you're going to have a bunch of new liquidity, and a wealth advisor can help you with that too. So those are situations where I think wealth advisors can help a small business. If you don't really have any of those three things, you don't really need it. Your question about emotional control when investing. I don't really know what you mean by that question. What do you think the economic situation in Brazil? I did a video about a year ago called "The Economic Future of Brazil." The politics and the leadership hasn't really changed there since, and commodity prices really haven't moved enough either. So I think my outlook based on that video I made last year still holds. So just check out my archive for the economic future of Brazil. Um, let's see. If you were appointed director of America, what are the biggest issues facing America, and what did you fix and how? What was the lowest hanging fruit? I think the biggest issues right now for America are the immigration situation, monetary policy, and fiscal policy. Those would be, we would need to find a way to balance the budget. We need to find a way to have an immigration system. And I'm going to do a whole video about the economics of immigration in January that balances out allowing top talent to come to this country without the negative side effects, primarily driving down aggregate wages. That needs to be solved. And yeah, the government and then monetary policy. You need to want to have a strong currency that is not going to be consistently declining and causing workers to fall behind. And then housing policy, but that's a state and local issue. But I think housing policy is also a key issue. It's not sustainable to have housing prices be like over 6 to 7 times the average income. That leads to a lot of perverse incentives for our society. And a lot of the social ills in American society is just a byproduct of the cost of living being too high. So even with inflation coming down, the cumulative inflation from the past is still here and is not going away. And so we need to deal with that. I don't really know enough about buffer ETFs to comment on those. Do you think the Trump administration will decrease spending and balance the budget? I hope they do. Like President Trump was not a fiscal conservative last time around. So that's why I'm surprised he's embracing things like the Doge this time around. And I'm rooting for the Doge. I'm not super optimistic it'll actually happen, but I think the odds of it happening are higher than what the financial market and the media believes it to be, even if it's less than 50%. And then what's it called? Do you think economists lie to themselves by defending immigration for the sake of labor demand and supply? I think that again, it's kind of like what a lot of the people I like to criticize, like the what if alt-hists of the world, called number go up economics. They say that it must be good because it promotes the number go up. And usually number go up actually means that the economy is doing good, despite what the naysayers say. But immigration is one of those times it doesn't, because these economists don't factor the quality of immigration, for one. And two, there's a lot of economic data and a lot of peer-reviewed studies that do show that immigration does bring down wages. And a lot of people say, oh, people aren't willing to work for at these low-skilled jobs. That's not true. If it was paying $100 an hour to do these low-skilled jobs, you'd find plenty of people to do them. We just have to have wages go up to the right price where it makes sense for people to do these things. And I think immigration actually has an effect of it's called trickle up wages. If you reduce the supply of immigration, that raises the wages on the bottom end, and the higher end jobs wages go up too, because you have to maintain the spread between the higher skill job and the lower skill job. Otherwise, the higher skill people would just move down to the lower skill job because it's less stress and more relaxed and pays close enough. So yeah, I think it's just, and that's also missing second order effects. I think a lot of one of my guests, I'm going to spoil a quote that he did on an interview that's coming out. He had a really good insight. He said, the left is really bad at misunderstanding second order effects, and the right assumes that every problem is a slippery slope. And that was one of the most insightful things I think I've ever heard any of my interview guests say on this channel. And I think it comes down to a lot of what you're saying on immigration. Like, it may look good on paper, but again, I think you can get 90 to 95% of the benefits of a loose immigration policy by filtering in only the people who are actually going to bring that value and eliminate 90% of the downside at the same time by having a smart and sane immigration policy versus what we have now. And we got a super chat. Thank you. McNello says, love the content. I agree with most perspectives. Strong disagree on your take of remote work being offshored, though. labor quality is not very fungible. Um, I think maybe for creatives, it may not be fungible. And the best and the brightest of creators are salespeople who actually are traders or people who generate real P&L. But those who don't, it's very fungible. Like, I mean, somebody needs somebody, and that's why ChatGPT is such a big risk of disrupting a lot of jobs. Like if you just have to be made, or have like do like some things like accounting, or like rote like paper pushing type stuff, why would you pay some person to do it if the bot can do it for cheaper? Or also a lot of places, even if it is just people, like you look at other developed nations with good education systems such as Canada, the United Kingdom, Australia, their wages are a fraction of those of the US. Why wouldn't a smart business just recruit people from University of Toronto and have them work locally instead of the same people from University of Chicago? I think University of Chicago is a better school in terms of quality, but I'm just using that just as a rhetorical example. Do you follow Ross Cameron? No, I do not know who Ross Cameron is. Do you think that M2 expansion is more accurate measure of inflation? Yes, it is probably more accurate, but I think the most accurate form of inflation over a longer period, the long period of time, like 10 years plus, is the gold price. But there's also private sector indicators. Like with all the information out there, you can build. I do this as part of my investment process. I have an alternative CPI that I basically use the same weights as the BLS, and then I find private sector data to show the year-over-year price of those components. And I can build my own inflation model. So it's not perfect, but there are ways you can do this kind of thing. I think M2 is closer, but the CPI metrics are flawed. I talked about that in a previous video I did in July about the state of the American consumer. Yeah. I'd appreciate, let's see. I was actually going to, speaking of red, blue rays comment about women in finance, I've actually thought about doing this because somebody suggested a previous one is what they want about career advice, particularly for women and women in finance. And I may have a guest in mind for that. And if that's something that people would be interested in, I could bring her on. Yeah, let's see. How does one manage a large influx of wealth? I see a lot of Gen Z money blow it on things like nothing. Is there psychological effects to sudden wealth? Yeah. If you make money too quickly, you feel like it's unearned. There's a cycle, like that's like the old money guilt is also a similar kind of driver. People who are professional athletes or work in Hollywood. And you also feel like if you made it this easy, you can do it again, even if that's not necessarily the case. And so they tend to be a lot of them tend to be more free with their spending. Like if these guys are smart, they hire advisors, not because necessarily the advisor's going to generate superior returns to the market, but he will check those impulses. And the advisor is probably one of the few people who will tell you no. Like before I was managing money, I was kind of my informal financial advisor for my family. And half my job was basically to tell somebody no for a big spending decision because that somebody you trust, and they're not just some miser always going to say to them to be cheap and they don't like their life, but somebody got to put a check, because if you leave some people to their own devices, they're going to spend all their money as fast as they make it. Yeah. Do you follow Noah Smith? Yeah, I read his blog, No Opinion. I don't agree with a lot of his politics, but I think he has some really good insights, particularly on second order issues and international economics. I found him originally doing research for the Economic Futures series about other countries. What question do you think someone should have asked? There is no question somebody should have asked. Jack asked, what do you think about feminist type developments in past societies or impacts and how it could be integrated or moved on from? Yeah, I mean, I think some of those have been positive, such as like having basic economic and property rights are a good thing. Like nobody should be chained to their family, especially if their family doesn't care about them or is abusive and giving women the optionality to have their own control of their own money is a good thing. Um, like the problem with feminism is not that kind of issue. The main problem with feminism is the idea, or modern feminism. And I don't really want to talk too much about this because it's not really the mission of my channel. Is the idea that you use it as a way to put people who otherwise wouldn't be qualified for certain positions or certain opportunities ahead of those who are. I'm generally meritocratic. Like, no matter what the person's gender or ethnic background or identity, you should not be playing favorites, and the best people should be in charge. And if that distribution isn't 50-50, then that's life. Who knows? Maybe it might be the other way around. But yeah, I don't really feel like you should be restricting economic opportunity for women, but you shouldn't be giving them favoritism either. Let's see. Think about Native American shell jewelry and its role as money in ancient American economy. It's kind of like any other proto coinage money. It's kind of like people need it provided a store of value, a unit of account. Like their shells were scarce enough that like you couldn't just find a bunch of them and overflood the supply. And they were small enough and compact enough that you could make transactions with it. It just served as like another form of coinage. I don't really think there's anything as much to say about that. Let's go back up because I might have missed some. I'm probably got about 15 to 20 minutes left before I end this. So get your questions in. Let's see. Thoughts on distributions of Catholic economic theory. I talk about this in the iceberg of economics. I'm learning actually a lot about Catholic social teaching and economics and business practices just as part of my faith development. And if people think that would be an interesting video, I don't really know if people would really, I don't care about Catholic economics. I don't really know how big of an audience mine is Catholic or cares about these issues. But if there's enough demand, I'll make that video. I just don't want to alienate my non-Catholic audience. But yeah, it's an interesting idea because the church has kind of struggled with, because they, on one hand, they oppose socialism because of the lack of human agency and a lot of the negative impulses that it has human action and incentives. But on the other hand, the church also believes that you shouldn't, how the market shouldn't be used to exploit or mistreat workers or underpay people or other types, or have monopolies or things like that. And so distribution is the idea that you really shouldn't have large mega corporations that have near monopolistic shares of things. And I think there is some merit to it, but watch my video for more details on it. Do you think the Doge can run a surplus like Javier Milei did in Argentina? I think it's very possible if Congress can fall in line. Like the majority is so slim for the Republicans now that it's going to be hard for them to pass anything. And if they pass nothing, the default will be a tax hike. And so as a result, you'll have a net tightening in fiscal policy. I think the deficit has a higher probability of going down than what the market thinks for various reasons. What do you think about platinum? Platinum is very tied to the automobile industry and catalytic converters. And with the movement to EVs, which has kind of reduced demand for platinum, and it's way more industrial focused. Like if you want to just bet on like an anti-fiat, you're probably better off with gold. I don't really know the specific supply and dynamics of platinum because I haven't really followed it for the last 4 to 5 years. But yeah, it's definitely more of an industrial metal. Let's see. What is the best career in finance? I'm biased. I like working in the investment management industry as a portfolio manager and doing research and analysis and selection of investments for my clients. And it's a personality thing. If you're more extroverted and have good social connections, wealth management is the best because you're just leveraging friendships and building connections and turning your Rolodex into a profitable business. If you are more of an introvert analytical guy, maybe the quant world is good for you. So it really kind of depends. It's a personality vibe. But for me, I like what I do in terms of portfolio management. Let's see. When it comes to wealth, how can you make sure it doesn't break apart family and friends? How can you tell people no without affecting your personal relationships? Well, you have to make sure that you know that you're acting in their best interest. That you have really no ulterior motives. You have to make that very clear, and that's dependent on different people's situations. Yeah, and if you have any sort of tension with your siblings now, you need to make sure your parents write an ironclad will and trust, because your tensions with your siblings will come out in ugly ways via inheritance battles that will waste a lot of money on attorneys and quite a lot of acrimony in your family. So, yeah, that's then and that's kind of my answer to that question. And if you don't, and if you think somebody you're dealing with is going to be an envious type of person, you don't tell them if you have wealth. If you know they're not that kind of person, then you can be more open about it. But it's also assessing the personality types, the people you're dealing with. When I take interns for my firm, we're not big enough really to really take on interns at this point. It might be something we'll do in the future, but the answer is no for now. What is the world's oldest debt? Are there any debts from Babylon still accruing? I think the oldest debt are British consuls that were from the late 18th century that are still on the books. I don't think there's any debts. And then even those, I think government might have recently paid those off. So, yeah, I think most debt in circulation today is post World War II and probably even post like the great inflation of the 70s. So there's not that much debt left that's like over like 30 or 40 years. There might be some exceptions to that, but yeah, there's nothing left from like ancient Babylon or Egypt. There's been too many conquests and destroyed records for really any of that to have survived. Let's see. How serious is the threat of the BRICS, the dollar status? They'll only be serious if they have a hard currency alternative. Like if one of the BRICS countries gets a gold-backed or silver-backed or real estate-backed currency, that's the only way you're going to threaten it. Like the U.S. dollar will be the default unless if either the U.S. loses a major geopolitical war directly against a great power, which I don't see happening anytime soon, or somebody comes with a harder currency, and I mean harder, just like collaterally backed. Let's see. What colleges are actually worth the price? Watch my video about is college worth it. That I answered it all there. What are you doing to celebrate Christmas? Well, my family all lives fairly close here in Southern California, so I don't travel for the holidays. Everybody comes to my hometown because I live in the same city as my parents do. And so that's nice to see everybody. We have our Christmas Eve traditions and our Christmas Day traditions. It involves dinner, usually like some sort of surf and turf dish, which I really like. We go to mass, open presents, go for a nice walk along the coast. And I just generally relax, and I try to take work off during this time of year. It's my favorite time of the year. I like the optimism. I like the just the Christmas spirit and all that. So yeah, I'm really excited about Christmas, especially now that I have young nephews who are kind of experiencing a lot of this stuff for the first time. Have you seen the show Industry? No. Yeah, how's ethnicity figure in finance? Yeah, that there is a lot to that. I need to figure out a way to say that that's not going to cancel this channel, but there's nothing insidious. But like, yeah, there are different ethnicities who play different roles in the economy, and it's not just a Western thing. It's happened around the world, and it's happened in all eras of history. Do you plan on writing a book? I have written a few books already. I might write more in the future, but right now I have other things to do. Um, let's see. Any of your personal interests, will you succeed more if you have an insatiable interest in what you do? Yeah, I agree with that. Think software will be engineering will be relevant much longer, or should I pivot towards quant, private equity investment banking? I think some of it will be relevant. The stuff that can't be easily replaced by AI, like whether it's AI software, whether it's more creative type software design, or cybersecurity. But I'm not really a tech expert. But I think it's an industry that's at risk of disruption. I'm not going to lie about that. Are food prices ever going to go down? I mean, food prices relative to incomes, the norm is for them to go down. Well, maybe food prices always stay at these nominal levels, yes. But let's just say, for example, you're paying $6 for your pack of eggs and $20 for a pound of steak right now. There's a good chance you might be still paying $20 for that pound of steak and $6 for those eggs 5 years from now. And that's how they go down and your income goes up. Yeah. Thanks for the support and the super chat. I appreciate it. Yeah, what do you see the future of gas? Oh, you mean gasoline or natural gas? Um, so that's a question. What big plans do you have for the channel in 2025? Yeah, I'll repeat that. I am doing the Analyzing Finance with Nick World Tour. We've already started. We went to Las Vegas last week. I'm going to San Francisco January 2nd. All my Bay Area audience, I'd love to meet you there. We're going to do something in the Marina District. Specific venue depends on how many of you guys sign up and show up, because I don't know what capacity we're going to need. And then I'm going to San Diego January 11th. And then Orange County, the end of January in California. And then if the California people have good turnouts, we're going to expand this to the Northeast, Chicago, Florida, Texas, Switzerland, and hopefully have a stop in Canada and possibly Mexico too. And if your city hasn't been mentioned yet, go to my poll for and vote on where do you want me to come. If your city has enough votes, I will turn out to it. Yeah. Let's see. Any thoughts on Mexico's manufacturing rise, especially as it pertains to undermining Chinese influence? I think it's going to continue. I'm really bullish on Mexico long run. They may have some issues on the top of their governance, but those are more temporary roadblocks more than structural impediments. Onshoring, there's some things that just aren't going to make sense to manufacture in the United States. Like robots are not going to be able to do it, but it's going to be too expensive to hire a human worker in America. That stuff's going to go to Mexico. Mexico's education rates have gone up, and Mexico has improved its infrastructure, and like they have some issues. They have issues obviously with the cartels, but on the net, Mexico is on an upward trajectory, and America is going to be serious about investing in Mexico, particularly the large Mexican American diaspora here now who has money and wants to put it to work back in the home country. I think you're going to see a big like that's why the peso's been so strong, despite all the news about Trump or about like their political mess and all that stuff. Is because the capital is flowing, and yeah, I'm very bullish on Mexico long term. Do you have a Discord server? Yes, we do have a Discord server. One of our subscribers created one. I do share the links on the pages, but the problem really is that they expire in a week, and it's kind of frustrating because then people who don't see that post within 7 days don't get don't get to see the Discord, but you know what I'm going to try to do is create an invite link that I'm going to post in this chat right now, so you guys can. Here you go. Here's the Discord server, and other developments really for the channel, really, other than the tour, is I'm going to be getting a studio to upgrade the production quality of this channel. I'm going to bring on more guests. And yeah, I'm going to do more live streams too, because you guys seem to like them. So that is what my plans are for the channel. The main things are the tour, improving production quality. My goal is to get to the silver play button this time next year. I think I can do it. We've got a lot of momentum really since the old money video. I'm going to be diversifying the topics a little bit because I'm going to run out of social class things to say eventually, but I have a lot of interesting stuff. Okay, and here is the link to the San Francisco meetup if you want to come. And here's the link to the San Diego meetup if you want to come. And I'm also going to have links to the vote for the tour as well. North American Union. No, I don't think it's going to happen. There's just, the U.S. is already big enough of an economic union that you don't really need to incorporate these other countries. Maybe perhaps, and Mexico's, even though I'm optimistic about its future, the gap in levels of economic development doesn't really make a currency union viable at this point. Like, that was the problem with the Greek debt crisis, really, was that you had countries at different levels of economic development that caused their financing costs to be too cheap, and therefore that country racked up too much debt. And there's you need to have countries that relatively equal, and the U.S. is even is way above Canada now too. You need to have countries at relatively equal levels of economic development and relatively integrated markets to do it. I think you'll have more integrated trade, but I don't think currency union is viable. Are you planning on more videos on the American healthcare system? I mean, I did the series with Austin Walters a year ago. Nobody really watched it, and my view really hasn't changed since then. So, yeah, like I mean, I might want, if I find a good expert that has something different than what I said then, maybe I would do it, but it's not really something I'm not interested in. And I don't really have enough, I'm not at a medical background. Like, that's why I don't trade individual biotech stocks either, because with a lot of these things, you need a professional background in that field to really have an edge. And I think with healthcare, like, if I can find somebody who's both like a doctor by training and financially literate who would want to come on and talk about this stuff, that would be a good guest. They don't have to be famous or anything like that, but that's the type of person who I would want on for a healthcare special, for lack of a better term. And then I'm also going to post, here's the link for the forum if you want to vote on what city you want me to go to. And also, here's a link I'm also going to send while I'm at it, a link to my general consultation form if you have more specific questions for me that I don't answer on things like this live stream. So, yeah. Let's see, get Skrelly. That might be interesting. NYC event, yeah, that's happening probably in the second quarter, April or May. I like to avoid snow. I don't like cold weather. Do you think demographics USA can shift its values? For example, rugged individual freedom of speech. Yes and no, because it's also, there's a certain type of person who wants to come to the US who's predisposed to rugged individualism. I think you might see a change in religious balance. I think America is going to become a less Protestant country and a more Catholic country in the long run because of demographic changes. Uh, I think that, and that might have some social and political implications. I think you could see um, a more certain pockets of America be more collectivist and and less willing to move away because from their families. Um, like social economic mobility in the sense of not income movement, but people moving to other cities for jobs has consistently declined in the last 20 years. And changing demographics in terms of like the average age of the population and the type of people coming who are more family oriented to in this terms of new immigrants might be changing the idea that people don't want to move away from their hometowns. So you might see less more subtle things like that. But I don't think like the fundamental nature of America is going to change. Um, let's see. Yeah, Perth, Australia is about the farthest away that I can get, like from where I live. And yeah, and you're not the only person so far who has voted for that city. It's not very in demand. If I was going to go to Australia, it'd probably be Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane. Um, but the problem is I have enough votes in the country as a whole to go to Australia, but they're spread out across 5 different cities. So it doesn't make sense for me to have um, an Australian meetup yet because you guys are just too spread out. And I'd love to go to Australia. I've never been before. Uh, I've heard fun things. People compare it to like California in the 1950s, is what a lot of the vibe that people say about modern Australia based on people who went. Um, let's see. Um, is it possible to do a video on the finances of the royal family in England? Yeah, I mean, I could. I mean, I just try not to do the specific family ones because that channel I mentioned before, Old Money Luxury, um, does does a really good job of that. I don't really know what I can say that they won't. I mean, I personally have certain opinions on the monarchy, but I don't really think people really want to hear my opinions on whether the monarchy has a right to exist or not. That's not really um, a financial topic, but who knows? Perhaps. Um, let's see. How am I enjoying the Discord server? It's fun. I mean, I've never really been a Discord kind of guy. But I like you guys continuing the conversation on there. Um, I still feel like I have to prompt it sometimes, but the more you guys get involved and it develops a life on its own, probably the better it's gonna get. Yeah, keep up with the chat in the Discord, and I also will post whenever I have a tour event or you'll get uploads to videos and a lot of other things will be on there. So um, let's see. Uh, should we send the Delta Force after the Mexican cartels? That's a tough question, actually. I mean, I don't like that sets a bad. I'm afraid of the precedent that will set. Even if it might, the thing is that it's really the Mexican military needs to be going into there and fixing that problem, not us. And I don't really want to have like an equivalent of Iraq War II right on the nation's border. So that's my concern. Is the opposition to online gambling just a moral panic? No, it's not. Um, and there's a lot of deleterious consequences to it. Um, that I probably have to do a whole video about my views on gambling. So yeah, I don't really want to go too deep into it, but yeah, that's yeah. And if you want Aussie viewers, if you want me to do a tour in Aussie, I need your votes, and I want to make sure that there's enough of you there that like I don't fly out. That's the big risk with this whole tour is that I go to a place and nobody shows up. Uh, so far that hasn't happened, but that's the risk of like event planning. Um, let's see. What in your wealth management? What kind of assets do you invest in? What sectors? We invest in stocks, bonds. I use options mainly for hedging, but maybe for more speculative clients, we might do some directional things. We do look at alternatives, but we try to find the most liquid forms of alternatives because I've seen the return profiles of of liquid alternatives versus more private ones aren't wide enough for me to opt out of liquidity. But yeah, should we abolish the nanny state? It depends what you mean by the nanny state, but generally, yes. I think if you I think a lot of the social issues in society can be fixed by getting rid of the negative incentives that reward bad behavior. And once you get rid of all the negative incentives that reward bad behavior, if people are still like behaving in a suboptimally way, then there might be room for regulation. But first, before we try to institute new like morality laws, let's first try to get rid of the moral hazards before trying to force virtue. It's one step, but you got to crawl before you walk. Yeah. And should we hold defense ETFs? Is it ethical? I don't really think, because if you buying an ETF, is it going to really change whether a country decides to go to war or a government buys weaponry or not? The only way that you could kind of maybe think it's unethical is if you are financing a startup company who is making that kind of thing, because you are literally fueling their ability to exist and grow. That's how it is for a lot of these more socially like questionable stocks. I don't have any anti-defense sector. I don't think it's immoral to invest in the defense sector. That's my opinion. But for people who care about morality and investments, the mature public companies, you entering their stock is not really a vote of support. A vote of support is investing in startups who are emerging industries or recent IPOs or buying their bonds or being like a source of new capital. So that's what went wrong with Boeing. Yeah, that's way too long to talk about here. Let's see. Anduril. Well, yeah, Anduril is they're I think they're a little bit beyond the startup phase now. They're pretty big. They're a multi-billion-dollar company. But yeah. All right. How do you think big cities like New York and LA will deal with rising sea levels? I'm not worried about it. Miami is technically at sea level, and they've built the infrastructure to pump out the water that even with hit by hurricanes, it's still here. I think that the worst case scenario, you're gonna get 1 foot in sea level in the next 80 years. And I think there's hardly any cities that are gonna sink due to an extra 12 inches of water. Watch my Debunking the Doomer on climate change for more on that. I did a whole series about that. That's another thought I have for you guys. Should I bring back Debunking the Doomer? I'm wearing the Debunking the Doomer sweater today. That's just more of a coincidence than anything. But I had fun making those. And I feel like outside of there's not that many people who are both critical and have a critical, rational viewpoint, but who are also net positive about the society and life. I think you have either doomers who have plenty of them with good critical thinking skills, or you have Pollyannas who just blindly say, "Oh, things will work out. I don't really need to explain why." And I think both of those types of viewpoints are kind of a disservice to just the general narrative of both the economy and life. I don't think or Citadel has the power to pull the rug on the S&P. I mean, the S&P's valuations are very high, so if it goes down, there are plenty of justifiable reasons for it to do so. What's it called? Yeah, I want to try to bring the hope to you guys, especially now that at least the last few years, the fundamentals on the core have changed a lot for the better for the world. I think, as I mentioned earlier in this stream, I think that the dark age of America and just the world as a whole was basically from 9/11 or maybe even before, maybe the peak of the tech bubble, March 2000, to this year. Is going to be remembered 200 years from now as a dark age in world history. And we are just coming out of it right now. And I think it's going to be and Chris Street was the one who kind of made me think about this first when I had our interview. And now I've been really thinking about it myself. And it's like, look, there is a lot of, I think none of us, probably everybody watching this was a child or was never, or not even born to have living memory of what it's like to have good times. And the last real good times we've had in the United States were the 1990s. And I think that starting at this point forward, we can have another golden age. And yeah, there's going to be a lot of opportunities. Will there be bear markets? Yeah. Yes, of course, there's going to be bear markets in the stock market. Will there be recessions? Yeah. But the general trajectory, just things getting better, particularly for younger generations, I think we're at the start of that now. And I think a lot of us are not going to really know how to deal with it. We're not going to really believe it because none of us in our adult lives really, including myself, have really ever experienced truly good times in society. So it's going to be exciting for all of us. Are you pro-natalism? Thought on the birth rate. I think that the birth rate is a natural economic correction for the labor market. I've talked about this in debunking the doomer, but it's the idea that, like in previous down cycles, like the Great Depression, like the 30s and 40s was the last kind of dark age we've had in the West. Birth rates were the worst they'd ever been. And they were bad in the late 19th century, especially around the American Civil War. They were bad during the French Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars. Like Russia during its history and the Soviet Union and the collapse of the Soviet Union after had structurally low birth rates because it was a poorly managed economy and it was a dark age. And it's just a product of the times. And if you have too many people and the jobs don't pay high enough to buy like a 3-bedroom house or provide like the same standard of living that you got in your childhood, you're going to be less likely to have kids. And I think if times get better, people will have more kids. And if the birth rate will rise again once you have an excess supply in housing and other goods relative to the population, and you'll have a baby boom and it will normalize. Like, I'm not as worried about the birth rate thing, unless if you have floods of immigration that perpetually prevent the correction needed in terms of the labor market and wages. Like, that's my thoughts on it. I think it's just a natural market correction. I think birth rates will go up once housing is affordable, and so I don't really worry about it. Next, and I'd like to have a big family myself. And actually, if you want to think of a really based long-term trade for your own family's legacy, have a big family. If you have a large family and the rest of your peers are child-free or don't have very many kids, your kids will rule the next generation because they won't be competing against anybody. And the people who were born, the most successful demographic in American society was not the boomers. It was the generation before, the silent generation, basically people born between 1926 to 1946. Why? Because the Great Depression lowered birth rates. So there weren't that many kids being born. And they were able to piggyback off the boom of the bigger generation after them, the boomers. And so they were able to build a lot of wealth. And I think people born now are going to be way wealthier on average than either Gen Zs or millennials or the boomers. So yeah, that's kind of how these things work. It's just like any other labor and humans are like another supply and demand thing, not to put it crudely. Yeah. What city and state in the U.S. is most likely to experience an economic turnaround in the next couple of years? That's a good question, because this is what I'm trying. Like, as a real estate investor, this is really the question you want. Like, you want the places that are going to be growing, because if you have the overall population declining or aging out, it's not going to make real estate as safe as an investment as it used to be. So you want to go to places where they're growing. There's a lot. I can tell you places that are hot and growing right now, like particularly like the Rocky Mountain Northwest, places like Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, like those are booming. But like Florida is booming, but it's going to go through a bust in the short term just due to oversupply. Atlanta is booming because it has the highest wages relative to cost of living of any major city in America. But um, but I think that in terms of places that could boom in the long term that are kind of struggling, uh, inland California might have some potential, especially if California's politics starts to shift the other way because of how poorly run it's been the last 20 years. So maybe so I think that Clay's idea of interior of California might be a potential place for turnaround. Um, let's think about. I'm trying to think. Maybe some. I think a lot of the Upper Midwest, especially if climate change is a thing and you have more mild winters. The idea of living in a place like Michigan or Wisconsin becomes a lot more appealing. Chicago could be another one too. If Illinois' politics ever get better, and Chicago is a really cool city. The main problem with Chicago is it's just too cold. That's why I could never live there. So I think Chicago, and Chicago is the most affordable of like the major gateway cities in America relative to incomes by far. So yeah, I think actually now I'm thinking this through. I think Chicago is probably the one that the has a really good turnaround opportunity, but that's like a 20-year time frame. So that's why it's tough to invest in these type of things. Detroit is already turning around. I think Wisconsin could turn around quite a bit, and um, yeah, those are kind of places that look interesting to me. And then interior of California maybe as well. Um, yeah, that's that's kind of the and in Ohio, yeah, like you want to look at places where they have a relatively high educated population that is relatively young but has low cost of living, or it's a that and has a favorable business environment, or even has a bad business environment, it's more likely to turn around and get better. Like, so you want to have find a place that's been perpetually a bad place to live or do business, but that's improving. It's kind of like a stock that's down because the previous management is terrible, but there's a chance for it to get better under new management. Um, yeah. So that's what's your definition of the working class? It's pretty simple. Working class are people who make enough money that they can support themselves without support of like the church or the state, but they don't make enough to really save in any material way. That's my definition of the working class. Um, a lot of the class is not about income; it's about your relationship to money. So if you have a high income but you spend all of it, you effectively are working class because you don't really have any reserves. Um, but yeah, I mean, inland California is not a great place to live right now. That's kind of the point. That's why it may have upside. Um, you want to find the places that are beaten down. Uh, but like, if you want things that are going to grow now, again, I think the Rocky Mountain region, Colorado, I'm pretty bullish on, even with its political changes, because they're going to use the mountains like California uses the ocean to constrict development. So yeah, and then New Mexico might have potential actually too. I think the Mountain West is probably the place with the most near-term potential, like basically anywhere between like California and Texas and that whole block of states north to south. Um, yeah. Um, I think I'm gonna and I think I'm gonna wrap it up here. I have some evening plans tonight, and I might do another one of these if during the holidays if life is slow, but it'll be a surprise. I'm not gonna pre-schedule it. And then the other thing too is I'm gonna do a themed live stream in January 1st where I discuss goal seeking, and people can talk about their goals and how to advance them and like things like that. I don't know if what do you like that the idea of like a goal focused live stream to start the new year? If that's a stupid idea, let me know. If it's a good idea, let me know. I was kind of thinking about doing something like that for on January 1st. It'll be like, we have the new year. What are our goals to make our lives great and actually do something? Because this is the cure of all. The last lesson I'm going to give you guys is the cure of all anxiety is taking action. That's what I recommend to do. So, yeah, if you're ever feeling anxious or nervous about something, do everything you can in your control to fix it. And even if it's not that much, you'll know you've done everything in your power. And so you won't worry about it anymore because there's nothing left you can do. So, yeah, that's like an insight that I've just kind of come up with lately. And yeah, I will talk to you guys later. Thank you guys all for watching the stream, and thanks for all your support. Keep like, subscribe, share. I hope to see you guys on the tour, and whoever you can to support the channel. I'm really grateful for all of you. This has been a great Christmas gift to me, essentially having this channel grow to what it has become. And thank you for watching.